So I think Cameron makes a really good point. We seem to send pop to varying degrees of success in the last few years. Mae Muller, Ollie Alexander, even Sam is a pop song with a very good guitar solo. Suri is a very sort of radio-friendly pop song, and Michael Rice, although is a bit more of a ballad, but again sort of fits that sort of pop mould. We seem to have this thing in the UK where we're desperate to appeal to the Radio 1 audience, and I'm not entirely sure why we do that, because being honest, Radio 1 hasn't really given much of a damn about Eurovision, and in the historical days of the contest, such in the 80s, a lot of the artists would complain that Radio 1 would not play their song. In fact, you were more likely to get a slot on Top of the Pops than you were to get a slot on Radio 1. So it's interesting now that we are obsessed with trying to get a radio-friendly song that Radio 1 will play, when really they've had no real interest. And Radio 2 have been a much bigger stalwart of the competition in terms of commentating on the competition itself, but also having a role in commentating on the Song for Europe competitions. So we do need to expand out of that sort of pop genre, and it shows with the winners this year that you really have to try and do something that's a little bit more outside the box. Now that doesn't mean sending novelty, but what it does mean is that we need to try and send something, anything, country, rock, rap, whatever. And if we're going to do it in an authentic way. Whenever we've tried to send things like rap, we've ended up sending things like Daz Sampson, and to a slightly lesser extent Love City Groove, who are probably a bit of a more legitimate act than Daz Sampson was. We've had country type singers in national finals. We had two of them in Your Country Needs You, and we completely ignored them. We seem to be averse to sending things outside of the pop genre, most famously in 1978, when we had an awful lot of Motown and soul acts taking part in the Song for Europe contests, and instead we went for Coco, and we lost some really good songs that year. And actually, when we then tried to do Motown in 1984, it ended up almost being not a parody of Motown, but it was a very light version of it. And similarly, Liquid Gold in the Song for Europe of 81 was sent with a disco song, but disco was pretty much on its way out by then. So whenever we do these things, we seem to be either doing it in a novelty way, or we do it in a way that is behind the curve in terms of what's in at the moment. And I don't say this as someone who knows a lot about what's in, but I can just talk about the way in which the BBC and the United Kingdom historically treat songs that aren't typical pop songs. So we do need to sort of try and expand what we do. We do need to move away from pop. We need to take a risk. If we went back to a national final, you need to have a shortlist where there's quite a variety of different songs, and you don't have the novelty song that everyone ends up voting for because they think that'd be a really funny thing to do. But if the BBC are going to continue to pick a song, move away from established pop artists and go to the singer-songwriters, go to the country musicians, go to the indie bands trying to make it, and give them a chance, because at the moment we're not winning with trying to attract a radio-friendly audience. And one of the other things is that in the interviews that the BBC did on the incredibly good podcast, the Euro Trip, the BBC were saying, sorry, I'm walking uphill, I'm very unfit, but the BBC were saying we've got Ollie with a view that we are aiming for a number one chart hit. Number one, he hasn't achieved that, and I don't think he's going to achieve it this week. But number two, that's the completely wrong way. You don't try and win Eurovision by aiming for number one in the charts. You win Eurovision by going for a song that is good, well performed, and staged in a really good manner. So I think there's a lot to be done, but yeah, that's what I think.